Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Martin Pedigo, and I'm telecasting live from Pennsylvania. In today's political affairs, we are so excited to have two personalities in our midst. Today's topic: how to safeguard properties in Africa, and the role of the media and the civil society. In our political affairs program tonight, we are looking at how state properties can be better preserved on the African continent for the future generation. While Western nations are pushing hard to preserve natural resources in the face of climate change, leaders in Ghana sadly appears to be distributing these critical reservations among themselves. Just this past week, a credible media organization, the Fourth State, published a shocking revelation of how a former Forestry Commission CEO alleged grabbed portions of a major forest reserve in Accra. The same person grabbed portion of a Ramsar site in Tema. Meanwhile, weeks earlier, the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, signed an executive instrument declassifying portions of the same Achimota forest as forest. Clearly, these are worrying trends for environmentalists and the African youth in general. So, in our political affairs program tonight, we are asking, how do we preserve these natural reservations for future generations? We are fortunate to be joined by Manasseh Awuni Azuri. He is an award winning investigative journalist with many years of practice. He is also the editing in chief of the Fourth Estate, the media organization that published this expose. We also have, unfortunately, we were supposed to have Vintus Azim, but for now he's traveled to the north and the network has been a problem. He was supposed to be with us, but we also do have a legal practitioner, Yao Sampa, to provide us with some legal perspective. Gentlemen, you are welcome, homely welcome to the show.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much for having me, sir.
Mr. Manasseh, I'm going to be starting the first 10 questions with you because I know you're a very busy person and you'll be leaving us after the 20th minute. And then from that for I'll continue with the sample. But let me start with you, Mr. Manasseh. Kindly provide us with some detail of this expose.
Well, when the issue of that Chimoto forest happened, some of us were very skeptical of the government and its moves. And we've almost always had it right anytime we challenged the government's intentions. But in this case, the government came out strongly that there was no any other motive beyond giving part of the forest reserve to a family called the Owu family. Some of us raised questions, but the government was very adamant and said everything was very clean and transparent. So when we saw that there was a will and that part of that forest was in the will, we decided to publish it because it went on to prove a point that we weren't wrong after all. So
Okay.
that's how come we were able to publish the entire will. Otherwise, this could have been a private matter,
Okay.
but you had a lot of public interest in there.
Okay. I'm going to go deeper into this. I don't know whether if you will have answers to that. Apart from the land, what else is contained in the will? I know this is a very particular, personal and legal matter, but I'm just throwing this question before you. Apart from the land, what else is contained in the will?
Apart from the land, we had a number of things in the will. We had bank accounts and investments, both home and abroad.
Wow.
We had houses, I think about 15 or so, 13 houses and 15 vehicles.
Wow.
We had a number of lands, some in prime locations in the country.
Right.
And of course, there were cars, there were businesses, including mining businesses.
Right.
And one of them, we later learned, was operating in a forest reserve
Okay.
and had even been given trained guards, forest guards, who were
Okay.
paid by the state. At the
Okay.
time, this man was supposed to be protecting our forest reserves.
Okay.
And so all of these put together, we decided to even check his asset declaration, because public officials are supposed to declare their assets. And when we ran our checks, we realized that the late Kwejo Usofriye, popularly known as Sir John,
Yeah.
did not even declare his assets whilst he was in office.
Okay.
And so the question remains, at what point did he acquire these?
Cool.
And we also realized that 5 of the houses were acquired, and the dates on them were when he was in office as the
Right.
CEO of the Forestry Commission. So beyond the lands, these assets also raise questions about the wealth of this public office official,
All right.
and when he may have acquired all of these, and perhaps
Right.
the propriety in the process of the acquisition.
So, is it normal for a government official to be in office without disclosing his previous properties, and no one takes him on? Is it a normal trend?
Well, we have a problem with asset declaration regime, and Mr. Sompa, who is a lawyer, would be able to provide more
Right.
details on this. But what it says is that they have to declare their assets before taking office, and whilst leaving the office. Some are
Right.
supposed to do it every 4 years.
Yeah.
But for
So,
someone like him,
yeah.
he should have declared at the time he was taking office. Of
Okay.
course, he died in office, so one would say that he couldn't have declared at the time of leaving office.
Right.
But the law required that he declare before taking office. And we at the Fourth Estate have secured copies of the asset declaration that have been done, I think,
Right.
since from 2013 till date. And so we are able to tell who declared their assets and who did not.
So, how long was he in office? How long
He
was
was
he
in
in office?
office from 2017 to 2020, July 2020, when he died.
3 years.
Yes.
Had all these things, all these powerful properties within 3 years. Wow. Anyway, some of us are in the diaspora, so we really want to know what happens in Ghana is of a great concern to us. So tell us, who is Sir John? We don't know him. Who is he? And how
Sir
powerful?
John was a lawyer.
How powerful was he in the current administration?
He was a lawyer, and no, we didn't know much about him until he became the general secretary of the governing New Patriotic Party, I think 2010 to 2014. And I think he lost the elections and was behind the scenes till he was appointed the CEO of the Forestry Commission when his party won power. At the time, we're hearing rumors that he might want to run for a national office of the party, and whatever those ambitions were would not matter now, because he died before the next election
Okay.
of leaders of the party. So I will say he was an influential member of the party, having been elected as general secretary, national general secretary, and still remained active in the party.
All right. Okay. Since the release of this report, what has been the response from the government? I know this. I don't know whether this will be an indictment to the administration since he didn't declare his assets before he started office. But the question is, since the release of this report, what has been the response from the government, the MPP government?
Well, the government has tried to deny his association with the lands. The ministry released a press statement and said that they had run their checks with the Lands Commission and didn't find his name as having lands in those areas. It wasn't strange that his name wasn't found, because if you look at the will,
Yeah.
it appeared he tried to hide ownership of the company. So He took the lands in the names of certain companies that appeared a bit distant from him until he died.
Yeah.
And some of them were taken in the names or in partnership with certain people.
Yeah.
And this is very common because politically exposed persons
Yeah.
would normally want to hide their affiliation with whatever assets they acquire whilst in office,
Yeah.
especially when they are so blatantly linked
Yeah.
to their main duty, because the Forestry Commission had oversight responsibility over the Achimota Forest.
Right.
The Forestry Commission was the one that was supposed to stop people from encroaching on the Ramsar site.
Right.
And he said John was on record to have gone there to warn chiefs and other private developers not to desecrate that protected land. And so it was very normal in this case
Yeah.
that he wouldn't use his own name to acquire these assets. And so when the government said they didn't find his name, it was a bit disingenuous because the will stated companies in whose names those lands were held. That aside, the government again said that it was going to confiscate whatever land he may have acquired back to the state. And so, as we speak, if anything the government says is to be taken seriously, then it means the Achimota and the Ramsar site lands wouldn't go
Right.
to his family.
Yeah, we in the U.S. here, both the African Americans and then Ghanaian community are so keen to this Achimota Forest saga because looking at the world and climate change, etc., etc., Achimota Forest has been in existence even before the colonial days, before Gold Coast. So for an individual to just try to claim ownership of part of that land, it raises eyebrows to some of us here who are so into bring about climate change. Okay, let me. So what? So what should civil society? What kind of role can we play? I know you. I know you. I know that you can't do this all by yourself. What role should civil society play in act of corruption in Ghana? Because hey, we sit here and after so many years, and it looks like nothing is happening. You know, um, I don't know. Tell us much about it. How can we fight corruption in Ghana, in
Well,
Africa? In
I
Africa.
think civil society has a number of roles to play.
Yeah.
The first being advocacy,
Mm.
the second being supporting individuals and journalists and media organizations that are fighting corruption. And the third one is to explore legal avenues,
Right.
sometimes taking the government to court and challenging some of the decisions and processes
Yeah.
that the government engages in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that angle has not been very successful
Okay.
because in some instances, the judiciary hasn't been very helpful.
Right.
I say this citing the example of the Auditor General,
Mm.
who was forced out of office by the president under very disturbing circumstances. Some civil society groups and individuals went to the Supreme Court to challenge this. It took so long a time
Mm.
that when the Auditor General's tenure hadn't even expired, he was asked to leave office and his retirement age was due. The case hadn't been called.
Right.
And so some of them, like Professor Kwekwa Sari,
Right.
popularly known as Kwekwa Zan on Facebook, actually went to the Supreme Court to withdraw the case, saying that the reason he brought a case to the court
Right.
had been defeated. And so this was a public interest litigation by civil society and public interest or public spirited individuals
Mhm.
who couldn't get the justice they demanded because that justice was delayed. So sometimes these are some of the impediments or hurdles they would have to scale in order to do their work. But I think civil society shouldn't give up
Yeah.
and continue to push because no government would concede so easily. And so, if they don't get the needed response or
Yeah.
results in one case, that shouldn't end their advocacy.
Right. There are indications that shows that some of the part of the arm of government administration are just trying to prevent you and some of your colleagues from finding out what is really happening. What about the Ghanaian people? Are you receiving support from the Ghanaian people when it comes to fighting corruption? I mean, the Ghanaian people.
Well, there is support, but I think it isn't enough.
Mm,
If the people were so much concerned and made their voice heard strongly, the political elites and their accomplices in the private sector would
right,
want to sit up and listen. I think there is more that the people can do. The most disturbing thing is that they've managed to divide the society into two equal halves,
okay,
NDC and PP.
mhm,
And so if an act of corruption comes up, the default position of members of the governing party is to defend it
yeah,
and try to malign, insult, and accuse and threaten the journalists or
right,
civil society actors bringing out the corruption.
right,
And you'd find the opposition party and its members pretending to care. And if they are
right,
in power, it also follows that same trend.
right,
And so the politicians and those engaged in acts of corruption almost always get away with it because they feel
right,
that because of political fanaticism, they should be able to get some support and continue to do the things they do. So
right,
I think there should be more that the people who are affected by these acts of corruption, mismanagement, and bad governance, they should speak up more. And
right.
if those in power realize that they are angry enough, they would want to sit up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You are doing a very good job, and I pray to the Lord Almighty that just as you have always been unilateral, you continue to be unilateral. If the next administration comes into power and you find out that such a thing is still going on, you will expose them too. Well, let me just proceed to the next question. You did an expose on the PPA boss. Um, should we be expecting some scandal?
Well, for now, the PPA boss, as we speak, has been charged,
Yeah.
I think, with 17 counts. So he's facing the law court,
Mhm.
and that case is proceeding. The
Is it
special
a way?
prosecutor.
Is there a way you can outline the 17 counts so that we can viewers in the US can know exactly that 17 counts what it entails?
Well, they bother mainly on using public office to enrich himself
Mhm.
and also manipulating the procurement process to give companies that he owned an unfair advantage.
Right.
So these counts basically bother on these two main laws or issues.
All right. So let me ask. So what do you expect to be the outcome of this particular story? Even though you don't have the power, the court is going to decide, but what do you expect?
Well, as you rightly stated, it is in
Yes.
court.
Yeah.
The special prosecutor says he has a very strong case. I expect him to put all his arsenals forward. I also expect ABAJ, who is the former CEO of the PPA,
Yeah.
to be given a fair hearing. And at the end of the day, I expect the courts to come out with a judgment
Yeah.
that is in line with the facts that are adduced as this case travels.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want to preempt whatever judgment that will come out of the court. I hope and trust
All right.
that all the three parties involved,
Right.
the prosecution, the defense, and also the courts, would go according to the dictates of their conscience.
Right.
And at the end of the day, justice should be served.
Right.
If indeed he did something wrong, I would expect him to be punished. If the court finds out that, well, what he did wasn't wrong, I expect him to have his freedom.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I expect justice to be done in this case.
All right. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll reframe this question again. I know you've answered it already, but I'm going to rephrase it again because I know this is going to be your last but not the least question. Do you think the media and civil society in Ghana are speaking truth to power, even though
To some
pressure is coming
extent,
from government.
yes, to some extent, yes.
Yeah,
And when we talk of the media, we have to also be able to distinguish between journalism and just media practice.
right.
There are so many radio stations that are set up to do commercial broadcasting.
Yeah,
That is, you find a business person who is perhaps producing alcohol or other beverages or food or doing other businesses
right,
and sets up radio and television stations
right.
to provide a voice or a platform to market those other products.
Yeah,
You have quite a number of the radio stations and television stations that are also set up by politicians and their cronies. And
yeah,
the main purpose of setting up these stations is to advance their political interests.
mhm,
And you have a very few of them that are set out to do critical journalism.
right,
Now, for some time now, in the past 5 years since the Akufo-Addo administration took office,
right,
some of us in the media have realized that the news around press freedom continues to get tighter and tighter.
right.
And the recent press freedom ranking, World Press Freedom Index by
Mm.
Reporters Without Borders,
Yes,
as to some of the things we have been saying, that press freedom has seen a sharp decline in these past few years. So there are people who are happy or willing to be critical, but
yeah,
the reality on the ground does not support that kind of journalism or advocacy on the part of civil society.
yeah,
And there are a few that are still risking it all to
right,
do the best they can to safeguard our democracy, to enhance transparency,
right.
and to hold the government and those in power accountable to the people of this country.
Okay. There is a text message for you, and I would like to read that. This text message is coming from Enoch Hanko. It says, please, do you think that educational leadership can help in any way to fight corruption or rebuild trust in a public sector institution in Ghana? It's a question to you.
Yes, educational leadership can help. There is nothing that education cannot do. There is nothing that true leadership cannot do.
Right,
I think if we want to go that way, we should even start targeting basic schools, senior high schools, and the young ones.
right,
The mindset that public service is to amass wealth is a very toxic one and can only lead us into a ditch.
right,
The mindset that all you need in Ghana to be respected, be called honorable, and even be considered for an elected office is to have money is one that is going to sink this country.
mm,
And the mindset that how you get your money doesn't matter,
mm,
and that what matters is you making the money, and
right,
then the whole country will be at your beck and call.
right,
It's also a very dangerous one that does not portend well for our country.
right,
So I think that we should have the right leadership
mm,
and we should be able to educate not only those that are up there,
mm,
but the young ones coming,
right,
so that if we have the right role models and we imbibe the right values
right,
into this generation of young people,
right.
we should have some hope for the future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Azuri, for a good job that you are doing. We are monitoring you from here. A lot of the media stations. You'll be so surprised. I mean, CNN is monitoring you. You'll be so surprised. Fox News is also monitoring you. But just keep on with a good job and continue remaining unilateral. I would like to let you go
Thank you.
because I know you are a very busy person. And thank you so much for picking our call and then being part of our guest on this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And then if you visit the United States, don't forget to pass by Mozart Foods Media. We'll have something for you.
I will. I
A
will.
nice parcel,
Thank
something
you.
just to cushion your hard work. God bless you, sir.
Amen. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was our own big brother, Manasseh Awini Azuri. He's doing hard work in Ghana and is trying to help to expose certain corruption that is going on in administration. And we just thank the Lord so much that he is unilateral in this particular saga. We want to move to our next personality who is called Mr. Yao Sompa. Mr. Yao, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, I can.
I
It's
just
been
want to,
interesting paying attention to the conversation. I've been
I
at the
just
background listening keenly.
Yes, yes. And I just want to say we appreciate you have waiting for 20 minutes in the background listening to this conversation. I would like to start with you. What does the law says about assets declaration?
All right. So two things. The first one is our constitution. Our constitution is very clear
Mhm.
in terms of its provision on asset declaration.
Right.
So our constitution, and with your kind permission, I would crave your indulgence to read some portion of it for the purposes of education of
Sure.
our listeners.
Go ahead, sir.
So chapter 24 basically of our constitution provides a code of conduct for public officers.
Mm.
And if you go to the chapter 24, the most relevant part for this conversation is Article 286 and 287.
Mhm.
286 says that a person who holds a public office mentioned in clause 5 of this article shall submit to the Auditor General a
Okay.
written declaration of all properties
Mhm.
or assets owned by or liabilities owned by him,
Mhm.
whether directly or indirectly. A says within 3 months after coming into force of this constitution or
Right.
before taking office, as the case may be, at the end of the 4 years
Mhm.
and at the end of his term of office. Two says failure to declare or making false declaration in contravention of this um, Article 287,
Yeah.
um, the declaration made under one or before the court, before a
Right.
commission of inquiry.
Right.
It goes on to say any property or asset, the initial declaration. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that,
Right.
and I was trying to get to five. The persons named in the constitution are the president, the vice president,
Right.
the speaker, any minister of state or a deputy minister, the chief justice, the chairman of a regional tribunal, the commissioner of Straj, any ambassador or high commissioner, the secretary to cabinet,
Right.
head head of ministries or government department, or equivalent of any civil servants, a chairman or managing director, or
Right.
general manager of any public corporation, and any such public officer as the parliament may prescribe.
Right.
So if you look at this provision in our constitution, and I just tried to read 286. The five is very clear as to persons who may make asset declaration, and it
Okay.
ranges all the way from the presidency down to all government-owned businesses and all departments of state.
Right.
The constitution is very clear as to which institution has the powers in terms of making the declarations happen, in terms of the architectures
Okay.
for declaration, and that is the Auditor General. So
All right.
the Auditor General shall make a written declaration of assets and liability to the President. He
Right.
himself may make the declaration to the President, but any other person, including the President, may make a declaration to the Auditor General.
Right.
That's the first thing I wish for us to know. Now,
Yeah.
Parliament went on further to make a law, which is,
Sorry.
sorry, the Public Holders Declaration of Assets and Disqualification Act. This act was promulgated in 1998 and is Act 550. In addition to our constitution,
Mhm.
which set a ground for declaration of assets, Parliament went ahead and sort of made a similar provision
Right.
in an act which basically reiterates the fact that all persons may make declaration. And in case where they fail to, and that's section 7 of that law basically says that an officer
Right.
required to make a declaration of his assets who contravenes this act shall be dealt in according to section 8.
Right.
Section 8 says that in accordance to the constitution, that the commissioner of Shraj or the
Right.
chief justice may make provisions,
Mm-hmm.
um, may set a finding, a commission of inquiry, and determine what after the investigation determine what sanctions are fitting for the exact findings the commission may find. And
All right.
so the, all the circumvention of the law, or what
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to do is to show that there's enough provision in both our constitution
Right.
and in statute to warrant the practice of declaration of assets.
Right.
However, I guess that since our constitution came into force in 1993, we've known that the practice can be a little more efficient. So
Right.
there's a bit more in practice that is necessary to make sure, because if indeed the fact that Sir John did not declare his assets,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that if we are keen, we would find out that maybe quite a number of people have not declared, even as at now.
Um,
And
you did mention of a name of the branch of government that is in charge of seeing to it that ministers declare their
that's
asset
the Auditor General.
auditor.
Um,
And I just want to
au-
ask a question: how effective has an auditor general been? Because if he was really effective, Sir John would have escaped this. And
I mean,
yes,
and I think that Manasseh, in his conversations, cited an example of where an Auditor General had some back and forth with the executive, which led to his own retirement, as it may be.
right,
The conversations of the Auditor General and the independence of independent constitutional bodies has always been a debate that never ceases.
right,
The question has always been, if the president is the appointing
yes,
person for
hmm,
the head of these supposed independent constitutional bodies,
yes,
can they assert their independence in the face of it? And in examples where we have seen some persons intending to assert that independence, what has been the effect of that independence, and how has that been interpreted in culture for
right,
other persons to follow? So I think that the real question is, as a social cultural arrangement
hmm,
allowed for auditor generals to assert that independence, the constitution and the law grants them,
yeah,
have they had cause to assert that responsibility to make sure that the law is effective?
yeah,
Because the provisions of the law are very clear. They have
yes,
the mandate. But the
yes,
real question is that why have they not been effective? If the
yes,
law is very clear to give you the mandate, why haven't you used it?
hmm,
And then that will come into an analysis of that office, the
right,
powers of that office vis-a-vis the
right,
executive, and in cases where there's conflict between the two offices,
right,
how has it been resolved in past? So I think is one of politics, and is one because again they are appointed by political heads.
correct,
The question then becomes, have they been able to assert their independence in
right.
a way that safeguards that everybody declares their assets?
Right. I mean, I would just speak plainly. I would just speak plain. Sometimes when we are having these discussions and we begin to call the name of the organizations and then we don't call those who were really in charge of that organization, it looks like we are still talking, but we are not really talking. You know, to be in a public service, a public office is to serve. It's not a tabletop business. You understand? Or it's not a personal a business. So therefore, if you have to declare your assets, I mean, we don't even need a law. We are just trying to prevent corruption, right? We have to set a certain precedent so the next administration that comes, they follow that same precedent. Okay, let us just look at Sir John's will. So the beneficiaries, what's going on? Are they going to benefit from his will or what? Let's look into that. Because
Okay,
already,
so
yes,
The interesting thing about that alleged will,
Yeah.
I think we're told by the release by the ministry that it is in court and is being litigated and its veracity is being questioned and things like that. But assuming without granting that it is indeed his will and it is deemed to be a valid will of Sir John, the question, and I've been asked this question a few times,
Right.
will the will stand? Will the beneficiaries indeed claim to have portions of the Ramsar site and the Achimota forest? And my answer has been it depends. It depends on two factors. Um, Again,
Okay.
it's a big
Hold on. Hold on. Let's calm down a little. Um, before you own something,
right.
maybe you have acquired it and it's a receipt to show that you really own this thing.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
is there a receipt to show that Sir John really owns the property? If there's no receipt to show, then we don't even have to go to court about it. What do you think about this? Is common sense.
And that's exactly the point you're making. To the extent that that acquisition, the basic principle of law is that you cannot give what you don't have,
Correct.
and so it's basic. To the extent that he doesn't have it, he cannot give it out. That is, as you say, that is plain common sense, right?
Right.
But the question is, what if indeed he had it? What if public lands are vested in the president
Mhm.
and public lands belong to the state, but the president or the institutions of state may divest of it as the executive may deem fit?
But
So,
can I? I'm sorry, I'm
yes,
not
please
interrogating
go
you.
ahead.
Okay.
No, that's absolutely
On the
fine.
on a sheet, on a white sheet, he has the Achimota Forest, part of the Achimota Forest, as his property. At what point did the president declassify some of those lands? As at the time that he bought the land, as we all claim, and at the time that the president declassified those lands, can you give me a dichotomy on it? The time?
So I'm sure that, and I get the question you're asking, but if
Right.
you go currently, there are people who state housing lands are being leased to people. So there
Okay.
are people who sit in lands that belong to the state as at now, but they have leases on those lands. Some have
For how?
30 years, some have 40 years, some have 50 years on state land. So
Wait
I'm
a
I'm just saying that and I hear you. I
Wait
hear
a
you
minute.
entirely.
Wait a minute.
Right,
Every land in Accra is being leased. Even though you are paying for it, it's either 90 years or 60 years or 50
right.
years or 45. So every land is leased in Accra.
But not
So,
every land belongs to the president. Not every land is a
mhm,
public land.
all
So
right.
if I lease a land from a chief, which
Yes.
is two land, the conversations are entirely different. If I lease a land from an individual family, that's an entirely different conversation.
Right.
What we're talking about is public lands, lands that are vested in the president,
Okay.
right? For the people of Ghana. The real question is, and I agree with you to say that if he did not own it, if he did not have a right to it, then
Mhm,
he cannot pass it on to any beneficiary. That's absolutely clear. The
mhm,
question, however, is if even he owned it, and I've seen releases from the ministry to say they check the land registry and there is no registered, it is not registered in his name, and
mhm,
that if even it is his, the state would still, um, as it were, exercise the right to hold those land for the people.
mhm.
And so the ministry is very clear. But I'm saying that as a principle of law, if it is a fact in evidence, and I'm speaking again because it is in court,
Right.
we
I know.
we should hesitate in the fact. But I'm saying that if it is in fact in evidence that the
Right.
state did grant him the lease, then the beneficiaries may have to be compensated for that lease, or they may have a right to it. But again, it turns on the evidence and the fact of it.
Right. Mr. Mr. Somba, yeah, I want to say thank you so much for spending time with us. I know I pinned you to the wall, even though the cases are caught, but you did well. You navigated your way through, and I'm so excited. I just want to say we are so excited to have you on Mosatus Media. We are telecasting live from Pennsylvania, and it's around 5 p.m. here, and I know it's almost 8 p.m. in Ghana. I just want to say that we'll be calling on you again and to find out how this case really transpire. And I know whenever I make that phone call, you'll pick it and then come and share your thoughts on Mosatus Media. Yes, sir?
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity as well.
And I just want to say we are so sorry we had to take you from your family. I mean,
It's absolutely fine.
thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our political affairs today. We were talking about corruption in Ghana. We started first with our brother, Manasseh Azuri, who gave us an outline of an impending issue that is in court, the PA boss. And then also we had our own big brother, a lawyer, Yao Samba, who's giving us depth knowledge of the land that is alleged that is in owned by the late Sir George, and the case is in court, so we don't want to go too deep into it. But I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with us. My name is Manu Pedigo, and I am telecasting live from Pennsylvania. And please stay tuned next week, Sunday, for political affairs. And then I just want to say, God bless you. Bye. And then see you later.